All right, let's talk about one of the biggest logistical nightmares of the C-19 pandemic. The absolute chaos that hit the United States Postal Service.
1.1 billion. That's how many packages the U.S. Postal Service delivered over the holidays, all while trying to deal with staffing shortages because of the pandemic.
And you know, some people here in Northeast Ohio say those long delays we saw over the holidays continue even today.
I'm sure you remember it. Those days were like a stain on your favorite white shirt. How could we forget the delayed packages, missing mail, ballots stuck in limbo, and an overall breakdown in what was supposed to be a reliable system? What if I told you that the USPS was facing an uphill battle that no amount of overtime, temporary workers, or government mandates could fix?
Nobody knows where it is.
Like 2.5 weeks now, 3 weeks
that it's been supposed to have been there and it's not.
The panic is setting in for many.
USPS doesn't know where it is. I don't know where it is. The customer doesn't know where it is.
Today, we're breaking down exactly why the USPS crumbled under pressure and what really went on behind the scenes. And trust me, it's worse than you think. Before we jump in, let me know in the comments what's the longest you've ever waited for a package. And don't forget to hit that like button if you ever had mail mysteriously vanish. So here's where it all started, the staffing crisis, because this is where it all began to fall apart.
Their on-time delivery score is sitting at 75%. Normally, that number would be in the 90s. That means 1 in every 4 packages are showing up later than usual.
When C-19 hit, thousands of USPS employees got sick, or had to quarantine, or took leave to take care of family. Sounds normal, right? Man, no. By late 2020, nearly 20,000 employees were out of work due to C-19 related reasons. That's not just a dent in the workforce, that's a crisis.
He said there is a lack of cleaning supplies. They don't have enough gloves for all employees to change multiple times a day, and no masks. A spokesperson says all employees have access to masks, gloves, and sanitary wipes. However, the employee we spoke with said they're so limited, he's buying his own.
Some locations were operating with 40% of their staff missing, and yet the mail kept piling up. And remember, this wasn't just regular mail. Online shopping exploded because people weren't going to stores, so suddenly USPS was dealing with an unprecedented amount of packages on top of being severely understaffed. You've got fewer workers, more packages, and a logistical system that was honestly never designed to handle this level of demand. So what did USPS do? They forced employees into mandatory overtime. They shifted workers between departments, and they hired temporary staff, but it still was not enough. And here's a question for you. Have you ever had to work overtime because y'all didn't have enough people at work? Yeah. Imagine being mandated to stay at work and you have other things to do. It's not exactly motivating and would definitely put a dent in your workflow emotionally. Now, you might be thinking, okay, that sounds bad, but at least they had safety protocols, right? Well, maybe not. USPS did implement strict COVID protocols like social distancing, daily health screenings, constant sanitizing, masks, gloves, even plexiglass barriers at the front desk. But all of that slowed everything down even more. Imagine you're in a sorting facility and suddenly fewer workers are allowed in the space at once due to social distancing. What happens? Processing speed plummets. Then someone calls in sick, and now they're scrambling to find a replacement before the shift even starts. And let's not forget the changes in package handling. USPS temporarily stopped requiring signatures for some deliveries like certified letters and express mail, which might seem like a small thing, but it completely disrupted tracking systems, leading to even more customer frustration. Some post offices even reduced their hours or temporarily shut down due to outbreaks. So it's the perfect storm of fewer workers, stricter safety protocols, and a relentless surge in demand that turned USPS into a ticking time bomb. And the worst part, the situation was completely unavoidable, and yet there was no real plan in place to handle it. But then came the shot. This is where things got even more controversial. You'd think after all of this, postal workers would jump at the chance to get vaccinated, right? Nope. Some people did, of course, but a huge portion of USPS employees refused due to concerns over safety, side effects, and skepticism about government mandates. They was ready to quit. The Biden administration actually tried to enforce a shot mandate through OSHA, but USPS managed to avoid it because, get this, they were worried about even more staffing shortages.
The mandate will likely cause many employees to quit or be fired. Tolino added, with the current supply chain and staffing challenges, the U.S. cannot afford more potential issues to our mail delivery system.
So instead, USPS offered incentives for the shot, offering paid leave and other monetary resources. But they couldn't force it, and guess what? In some regions, the resistance was so strong that the shot rates among postal workers stayed surprisingly low. And while all of this was happening, USPS had another problem: the insane spike in package volume. Because let's be real, when stores closed, e-commerce exploded. More people were ordering everything online: tissue, paper towels, and USPS, which was already struggling, now had to deal with a flood of packages like never before. Unlike FedEx and UPS, which could refuse shipments when they got overwhelmed, USPS couldn't say no. They had to take every single package, even when they knew they couldn't handle it. And the result? Backlog facilities, fully loaded trucks sitting on the side of the road, and customers waiting weeks for deliveries. The holiday season in 2020 was especially brutal. Some facilities reported record-breaking package loads, but they didn't have the workforce or the infrastructure to process them on time. And tracking, a total disaster. Packages were disappearing into black holes, showing in transit for weeks with no updates. Let me know in the comments. Did you ever order something during the pandemic that took way longer than expected? Of course you did. And we haven't even talked about money yet. USPS was already in deep financial trouble before C-19. They've been bleeding money for years, thanks to declining letter mail and an outdated business model.
Postal workers have been key in helping Americans remember life before the pandemic. Mail deliveries have continued as usual, but it's not clear how much longer they'll be able to do that. The postal system is running out of cash and may not make it past the fall.
But the pandemic made things worse. Sure, they made some money from the increase in packages, but it wasn't enough to offset rising costs. Overtime pay, PPE, and new safety measures and transportation disruptions all added up, pushing USPS further into financial instability. On top of that, the 2020 election put even more pressure on USPS because suddenly they had to handle a record number of mail-in ballots while still being unstaffed and overworked.
New warnings from the U.S. Postal Service are coming to light today, suggesting that it will not be able to deliver all mail-in ballots in time to be counted for the election. Because of the pandemic, mail-in voting is expected to surge this fall. That message came in letters sent to state officials around the country, and it raised the prospect of even bigger problems for November.
And guess what? Trump was furious. He repeatedly claimed, without evidence, that mail-in voting was a setup for fraud. He even opposed additional USPS funding, arguing that it would only help Democrats. Whether you agree with him or not, there's no denying that the USPS was caught in the middle of a political firestorm that only made their problems even more catastrophic. And finally, let's talk about the temporary service disruptions. Some international mail routes were completely suspended because airlines weren't flying as much, cutting off USPS from key transportation networks. Domestically, major mail processing centers were buried under a massive backlog, and in certain areas, deliveries were delayed by weeks. Rural regions and high-demand cities suffered the most, and some post offices shut down entirely when C-19 outbreaks spread through the workforce, all in the building. See, USPS is legally required to deliver to every single address in America, including rural towns where FedEx and UPS won't even bother going because it's not profitable. That means that when mail was backlogged, rural communities were at the very bottom of the priority list. Some people went weeks without no mail service. And this wasn't just about missing bills or late holiday cards. It became life-threatening.
The really big thing is medication. Both my wife, who's diabetic, and I've got a number of issues, especially now with the hospitals on red. We rely on the Postal Service to deliver our medicines.
As many prescription drugs were placed on the back burner, seniors and veterans in these remote areas, they depend on the mail to get medications they literally need to survive. And as USPS delays stretched into weeks, sadly resulted in death, not even associated with the virus, but were counted as such. One cancer patient in Florida reported waiting 4 weeks for chemotherapy pills that should have arrived in 3 days. Others with diabetes ran out of insulin while waiting on a shipment that never came. The VA had to step in and reroute prescriptions through private carriers just to ensure veterans weren't left stranded without life-saving medication. And this issue became so serious that Congress got involved. Lawmakers held hearings demanding answers from USPS executives. But at that point, the damage was already done. USPS tried to fix this, hiring temporary workers, reallocating resources, extending delivery hours, but it wasn't enough. The result, longer wait times, unreliable tracking, and a total breakdown in customer service. And while we're talking about USPS failures, let's talk about mail theft, because it skyrocketed during all of this. With millions of parcels sitting untouched in facilities for days or even weeks, criminal employees took advantage of the chaos. We're talking stolen checks, missing stimulus payments, entire pallets of merchandise disappearing from USPS warehouses. One report in California found that organized crime rings working with postal workers were targeting mail drop boxes, fishing out letters, and stealing packages for cash. Another USPS worker in Chicago leaked photos of mountains of undelivered packages sitting in an abandoned lot, completely unsecured. And let's be real, if your package got stolen, USPS wasn't rushing to help you. Their customer service lines were jammed. Tracking updates were completely unreliable, and at one point, the USPS Inspector General even admitted they had no idea how much had actually gone missing. Let me know if you were a victim of that. So what's the big takeaway here? USPS wasn't just a victim of the pandemic. It was the poster child of disaster under the weight of workforce shortages, government bureaucracy, and a mail system that simply wasn't built for the 21st century. The real question is, did the USPS ever fully recover from this? Or was this the moment that exposed its flaws beyond repair? Let me know in the comments what you think. Should the USPS privatize like FedEx and UPS? Or should the government step in with serious reform? Let me know in the comments. And guys, thank you for showing love. Make sure on your way out, like this video and subscribe to the channel, man. I love making these videos for y'all. And if you want to hang out with me a little bit more, I got something waiting on you in the next video. All right, see you guys later.